next item on the agenda is a public hearing. There is a hearing notice and it's procedural only. Instar SEMA, the 345 small k large V transmission line, and I would ask for the hearing notice, please.
The Cape Cod Commission will conduct a public hearing on Thursday, December 15th, 2011, 3 o'clock p.m. in the 1st District Courthouse, Assembly of Delegates, Chamber, Route 6A, Barnstable, Mass. The following development of regional impact was submitted to the Cape Cod Commission under Sections 12I and 13B of the Cape Cod Commission Act, Chapter 716 of the Acts of 1989, as amended in Sections 2, 3, and 7 of the DRI Enabling Regulations. According to Section 7D of the Enabling Regulations, the adjudicatory hearing procedure for energy-related DRIs shall apply to all DRI applications which concern proposed energy-related facilities over which the Energy Facility Siting Board, EFSB, asserts jurisdiction. As such, the adjudicatory hearing procedure for energy-related DRIs applies to this project. This project will be considered for DRI approval. The purpose of the final hearing is to allow for proposed corrections to and comments on the factual information contained in the draft written decision. This notice is being published as required by Section 5 of the Cape Cod Commission Act. Project name, Enstar SEMA 345 kilovolt transmission line. Project applicant, Enstar Electric and Gas Corporation. Project location, Bourne, Sandwich, and Barnstable, Mass. Project description. The project involves the construction of 1.5 miles of 345 kilovolt transmission line on existing rights-of-way in Bourne, separation of an existing double-circuit 345 kilovolt transmission line, increase in voltage from 115 kilovolt to 345 kilovolt on approximately 7.6 miles of transmission line located in the towns of Sandwich and Barnstable, and construction of a new 345 kilovolt substation on Anstar-owned property at 661 Oak Street in West Barnstable. The transmission line is proposed within existing rights-of-way held as easements from several different owners and crosses the Cape Cod Canal under terms of a license from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and an easement from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
Six, 2011.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, the committee members present was myself, Mary Pat Flynn, Joanne O'Keefe, and Leonard Short, and I entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
I would invite Andrea Adams to present the draft decision, please.
Thank you, sir. For the record, my name again is Andrea Adams. I'm the Cape Cod Commission's Senior Regulatory Planner, and I'm just going to scoot a little bit to the left so I can use the handheld slide advancer. I would also note that there's a limited number of the draft written decision at the table over by the coat rack. Love that modern technology. My project PowerPoint, you also have a copy at your places, is 20 slides, and again I will attempt to go quickly because you have a large agenda. Project description, I'll cover the jurisdiction, the standards of review, an analysis by the subcommittee of the project, and the recommendations. The project, as was read with the hearing notice, is the recombination reorganization of a proposed subdivision in Mashpee. The new subdivision layout, and you'll have large-sized plans showing the before and after condition in your packets that were mailed to you, would consist of 2 commercial and 9 industrial lots and 1 open space lot. It would also involve the realignment of a proposed subdivision road. The site is located at 588 Main Street, which is also at Route 130 in Mashpee. It's a 48.9 acre site. Currently the site's undeveloped, and at this time no development other than the road realignment is proposed. In terms of the Commission's jurisdiction, the project qualifies as a development regional impact under Section 3C, and you can see the standard behind me. Essentially, it's larger than 30 acres in size and was under common ownership and control on or after September 30th, 1994. And again, it involves the assembly and recombination of lots. In terms of the hardship exemption, you've seen this before during the Hydroid presentation by Attorney Senatori. The applicant requested, in this case, just a hardship exemption. The Commission can grant such an exemption where you find those 2 conditions on the slide behind me. That a literal enforcement of the provisions of the Act would involve a substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, and that desirable relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent and the purpose of the Act. For hardship exemptions, the project should comply to the maximum extent feasible with the minimum performance standards of the Regional Policy Plan, and any relief granted shall relate directly to the nature of the hardship and be the minimum necessary to address it. In terms of the subcommittee analysis, I just want to point out a few things that are covered in the decision. Mashpee does not have an adopted land use vision map. As such, the project would have been required to meet minimum performance standard ED13. As new development, it would be required under this minimum performance standard to meet 4 of 9 waiver criteria. Again, all that's proposed at this point is reconfiguring the subdivision layout and the road, how it runs through the site. So no development on the lots is known at this time. So the subcommittee found that hardship relief could be granted for any development that does not independently exceed Cape Cod Commission development of regional impact threshold. And I think that's an important distinction because, again, the development is not known, but if it's below the level at which it would trigger independent Cape Cod Commission review, the subcommittee found it would be appropriate to grant hardship relief, and doing so could be done without detriment to the public good and nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent or purpose of the Act. In terms of the other issue areas that the subcommittee looked at, water resources played a very important role in the review. One of the first minimum performance standards is Water Resources 1-2, which looks at locating wells adjacent to the project site and siting septic systems and other sources of contamination in such a way to protect those adjacent wells on abutting properties. Again, development's not known at this time, but the applicant was able during this review to identify those wells on those abutting properties, and the review or the information submitted during review indicates that groundwater flow is away from those abutting properties so that the wastewater from the on-site septic systems would not affect those properties. And as such, the subcommittee found the project complied, even though no development, what it is known at this time, complied with that MPS. The next issue that the subcommittee looked at was minimum performance standard Water Resources 1-4, which requires cluster plans for commercial subdivisions and shared wastewater infrastructure. The subcommittee found that the subdivision redesigned for purposes of this minimum performance standard is a cluster, and that the project will use low-impact stormwater road runoff design, and as such, it meets the purposes of minimum performance standard 1-4, the road does. The on-site septic systems currently are proposed instead of shared wastewater system. Again, though, those abutting wells have been located and the flow from those septic systems is not going to affect those abutting properties and those wells. So the subcommittee found that relief could be granted from that portion of minimum performance standard Water Resources 1.4 for any development that does not independently exceed a DRI threshold, and that such relief could be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent or purpose of the Act. As I said, Water Resources was the main focus of the review. The site is also mapped as both a potential public water supply area and as, parts of it anyway, as a wellhead protection area. Minimum performance standards 2.5 and 2.6 set a 1 part per million nitrogen loading limit in overload embayments and require setback to proposed sites for public wells. However, the regional policy plan also allows the Commission to remove the potential public water supply area designation based on information from the town or water district that they have no intention to use that property. And again, it's similar to the Hydroid case. In the file, we have a letter from and an email from Mr. Marks, the water district supervisor in Mashpee, that the town has no such proposal, and the district has no such proposal for this property, so the subcommittee found that the potential public water supply area designation on the site could be lifted. Water Resources Section 3 serves to preserve marine embayments. We would note that the project is located in 2 nitrogen-sensitive embayments, the Quashnet River and Mashpee River, and both are overloaded per the MEP findings. If the embayments are overloaded, they are subject to a no net nitrogen limit, and minimum performance standard Water Resources 3.4 allows DRIs to pay a nitrogen offset contribution to address that overloaded condition. The project receives a fair share credit of a little over $55,000, and it can be applied to the Mashpee River watershed. Ultimately, to address this issue, because those embayments are overloaded, the subcommittee found that it was appropriate to condition the project to comply with Water Resources 3.4, and that is allowed in the case of a hardship exemption because, again, the conditions can be placed on the project but adjusted to deal with the relevant issue, and that compliance can be achieved as development and redevelopment on the lot actually occurs. Wow. Minimum performance standard, I think I've gone backwards. Sorry. My apologies. One of the other issues that was critical was the fact that minimum performance standard Water Resources 2.2 limits the amount of hazardous materials and waste that can be used, handled, treated, stored, or disposed of in a wellhead protection area to a household quantity. As I noted in a previous slide, parts of the new Lot 5 and new Lot 6 are in a wellhead protection area. That's a state designation that cannot be lifted. And the household quantities of hazardous materials and waste are shown on the slide behind me. Because of the sensitive nature of the water resources issues, the subcommittee found it was appropriate to condition development and redevelopment on those portions of those 2 new lots, 5 and 6, that are located within the wellhead protection area, also called the Zone 2 area, to limit the use of and handling, storage, generation of hazardous materials and waste. And again, that's reflected in the decision. In terms of one of the last most important issue areas, Water Resources Minimum Performance Standard 7, Section 7, deals with stormwater management and low-impact design. The subcommittee found that during their review that Mashpee bylaws require use of this low-impact stormwater design, and found that hardship relief could be granted from compliance with Minimum Performance Standards 7.1 to 7.8 for future development on the lots, and that relief could be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the purpose or intent of the Act. In terms of Minimum Performance Standard Water Resources 7.9, it includes construction best management practices to handle stormwater runoff, 10 includes the post installation inspection of such systems, and Water Resources 711 requires a shutoff valve in the areas subject to the wellhead protection area to protect against contamination of groundwater. The subcommittee found that given the sensitive nature of the site, because that Zone 2 cannot be lifted, that it was appropriate to condition the project to comply with minimum performance standards 7.9 and 7.10, and also to condition the project so that development and redevelopment on those portions of the of lots 5 and 6 that are in the wellhead protection area to comply with that shutoff valve requirement. In terms of the next issue area that the subcommittee looked at, it was open space. The site is again mapped significant natural resources area. It's due to the potential public water supply area and the wellhead protection area. The open space requirement in this case becomes 2 times the developed area, which is 42.4 acres. However, minimum performance standard open space 1.3 allows for a potential reduction in the amount of the required open space if the potential public water supply area designation is removed, which it was based on that letter from Mr. Marks. Based on that, the open space requirement is reduced to the developed area, which is 21.2 acres. In this case, the applicants were proposing 26.8 acres as permanently protected open space. This exceeds the regional policy plan requirement by 5.6 acres, and the applicant requested and has the choice in the draft decision to permanently protect the open space via either a conservation restriction or deeding to the town. In terms of transportation, the subcommittee found that the applicant provided estimates of trip generation from possible future development. They were able to do that, and you'll see that analysis in your packets by creating theoretical development scenarios. The subcommittee found that this was consistent with MPS TR 0.1. MPS TR 2.1 requires that DRIs offset 25% of new vehicle trips. The subcommittee found the project would be required to offset 470 trips from those estimated development scenarios. The estimate of the trip reduction mitigation is a little over $1 million. Based on the fact that no development is proposed at this time, the subcommittee found that applying this mitigation to the project would result in financial hardship, and found that relief could be granted from the requirements of minimum performance standard 2.1 for future development on the lots without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent or purpose of the act. The other part of transportation, however, is minimum performance standard 3.4, which requires developments of regional impact to offset peak hour trips to address congestion on the roadways. The applicant and the subcommittee used a vehicle miles traveled equation to determine the amount of congestion mitigation. The amount of congestion mitigation was found to be equal to 184 afternoon peak hour trips, or an estimate of a payment of $427,534. The subcommittee, unlike with the previous minimum performance standard, found that it was appropriate to condition the project to provide the requisite congestion mitigation, and the draft decision reflects that the development, as development and redevelopment proceeds, those mitigation monies will be paid based on what actually occurs on the lots, given a specific schedule of uses. Just to wrap up transportation, minimum performance standard transportation 1.4 looks at safe driveway construction. 1.6 looks at whether signage would block site distance at the site drive, and 1.8 looks at safe site distance at the site drive. Even though no development was proposed, the subcommittee found that the project complies or would comply with these MPS based on the subdivision plans provided. The next issue area that the subcommittee looked at was energy. they noted repeatedly that Mashpee is a so-called green community, and that means that Mashpee is ahead of the curve because the town has adopted what's called the Massachusetts Energy Stretch Code. And this particular part of the, I believe it's part of the building code, requires energy efficient design. And I would note that that would be whether the project was subject to commission review or not. So the subcommittee found that the application of the stretch code to development and redevelopment that does not independently exceed the development and regional impact threshold is sufficient to address the energy and efficiency and conservation goals of the regional policy plan, and as such found relief could be granted, and that relief could be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantially derogating from the intent and purpose of the act. Affordable housing was also looked at. It's a non-residential subdivision. As such, it's subject to review under RPP Goal Affordable Housing 3 and Minimum Performance Standard Affordable Housing 3.1, which requires commercial industrial developments of regional impact to provide support for creation of affordable housing. The subcommittee found that relief could be granted from this minimum performance standard for development and redevelopment that does not independently, again, exceed a DRI threshold, and that doing so could be done without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent and purpose of the Commission Act. I only have 2 more slides. On community character, not to leave these out, the minimum performance standard in these sections seek to preserve historic, archaeological, cultural resources and deal with building siting, parking, building design, landscaping, and lighting. In terms of any feedback on historic or archaeological or cultural resources, there was a consultation letter from the Massachusetts Historical Commission in the file that the project is unlikely to have significant impact on historic or archaeological resources. Based on that and the other information submitted for the record, the subcommittee found that relief could be granted from compliance with this section of the regional policy plan, again for development and redevelopment that does not independently exceed a DRI threshold, and that doing so could be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent or purpose of the act. In closing, the overall subcommittee recommendation, they met on the 6th to review the draft hardship exemption decision. They voted unanimously to recommend approval of the draft written decision and unanimously to recommend that the Commission recommend the project as a hardship exemption with conditions. In terms of the criteria of approval, we've covered the regional policy plan. Just to round it off, in terms of districts of critical planning concern, there are none in Mashpee, so this particular criterion doesn't apply. In terms of consistency with the municipal development bylaws and local comprehensive plans, there is an email in the file from Tom Fadala, who's the Town of Mashpee town planner, providing you guidance on these issues, indicating that I believe the project would comply with review at the local level. In terms of the last criteria, which is benefits of the project are greater than the probable detriment. In terms of the benefits that the subcommittee found, I would note again that the project provides open space in excess of regional policy plan requirements. It will protect open space that is still located within an SNRA because of the Zone 2, and that the use of the property is in a manner more consistent with its zoning. It's zoned commercial industrial, and that's what it's ostensibly going to be used for. In terms of next steps, I only have one potential correction to the draft decision. You also all have it at your places. It's a colored sheet. It's a correction to water resources preliminary condition number 10. The correction is shown in red with one strikeout. The correction is essentially a housekeeping situation. It is consistent with some of the other requirements that are in the decision for lots 5 and 6, because only part of those lots are in the Zone 2 and parts are not. In terms of next steps, there's a vote to close the hearing in the record and ultimately to vote on the draft written decision with this one correction as amended. I'm available to answer any questions as well as other technical staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I would ask the applicant at this point to make a presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Attorney Michael Ford representing Cape Cod Cooperative Bank. With me is Mr. Kroll, Joe Kroll, the president of the bank this afternoon. Andrea has given you a very complete synopsis of what's in the decision, as she always does, so I'm not going to go back over the various issue areas and how the subcommittee chose to deal with them. I do want to kind of give you just a little bit of history of this property as it pertains to the bank and what the bank was seeking to achieve in advancing this preliminary subdivision plan through the DRI process. The property has the benefit currently of a 120-unit 40B permit. That's located to the rear of the site on the 32 acres closest to the base. Property runs from Route 130 to the rear where the base is located. In addition to that 120-unit 40B permit, there are 2 industrial lots approved on the site and 2 commercial lots approved on the site. So the 2 commercial lots are out front on 130, then there are 2 large industrial lots on the roadway that's already laid out, and then there is this 40B permit. In June of 2009, the bank foreclosed on the property, and that's how they became the owner of the property. Once they became the owner of the property, they took a look at the existing permits, they took a look at the zoning. What jumped out of them at the bank management was as follows. The property is zoned commercial in front for the first 2 lots, and then it's zoned industrial. The back half of the property, approximately 28 acres or so, where the 40B is permitted, is in a groundwater protection district. And so the bank reasoned maybe there was a better land use scheme that could be put together for this particular property before the bank sold the property, as it intends to do because it's not in the development business. So the bank officials and my office held a series of discussions with folks in Mashpee. Mashpee Town Planner went to the Mashpee Planning Board. And then we had a series of kind of roundtable discussions with staff here at the Commission about other potential configurations and uses of the site. And it seemed that the best proposed use was the one that we've advanced before you today, and that is to increase the number of industrial lots from 2 to 9, keep the 2 commercial lots that were already there, and then put the rest of the property, which is 26 acres, to the rear where the 40B was and where the Zone 2 is, into an open space area and subject it to, as is required by this particular decision, either a conservation restriction in perpetuity or to convey it to the town of Mashpee. The dilemma with advancing that was that it was going to be a DRI and subject to all of the DRI requirements, notwithstanding the fact that the bank wasn't going to build anything, just reconfigure the road layout and the lots. And so we took a look at various options, and one of the options was to proceed under a hardship exemption. And you might say, well, why a hardship exemption? Well, the current permits on the property, the 120-unit 40B, the 2 industrial lots, and the 2 commercial lots, currently generate, if they were developed, a certain amount of traffic, a certain amount of wastewater, all sorts of impacts, none of which had ever received commission review. But we were advised by staff that if we came forward as a DRI, it would have to be looked at as simply a vacant piece of property, which made little sense to us. But then the staff said, well, you could always apply for a hardship exemption, and if at the end of the day it appears that this is a much better land use scheme, then there may be areas in the RPP where the commission would decide to waive strict compliance with the performance standards. That's what's occurred. You have a decision before you that doesn't waive all of the standards. It requires some transportation mitigation up to the amount of $420,000. It requires mitigation for nitrogen loading, given where it is. It requires further review by the commission with respect to the small portion of 2 of the industrial lots that still are within the Zone 2. But it doesn't waive many of the other requirements of the RPP. And perhaps the greatest benefit, virtually all of the property now on the 48 acres that's in the Zone 2 will become open space. And so the subcommittee reasoned, and you've heard it in the decision, that in this particular instance they could make a finding that a hardship exemption was warranted and that the preliminary plan should be advanced. So the bank was looking for options for this piece. We think we've done a good job with the land use. We appreciate the subcommittee's patience and consideration, and we would ask you to adopt their decision with the one amendment that Andrea has mentioned to you. But I'm happy to try and answer questions if there are any.
Thank you. At this point, I would invite questions from the commission members. Ms. Austin.
Mr. Chairman, this is more of a clarification to Andrea. During our conversations that we had on this with lots 5 and 6, we had mentioned we wanted clear markings there so commission staff, when they went out there, they'd be able to find it and to show the difference between the wellhead protection area and the lands that are going to be developed. Is that going to be written in here, or can that be written in here? Because that was one of the clear things that the committee did say.
Yes, if you would look on your draft decision that was mailed to you, it was in your packets. It's on page 48. And for the benefit of the audience, I will read the relevant part. Prior to issuance of its water resources preliminary condition number 9, prior to issuance of a preliminary certificate of compliance for development or redevelopment on Lot 5 and Lot 6 by the Commission, and prior to issuance of any building permit by the Town of Mashpee for a development or redevelopment on Lot 5 or Lot 6, Commission staff will conduct a field visit to review the demarcation of the wellhead protection area Zone 2, and that the condition directly above that, Water Resources Preliminary Condition 8, states that prior to the preliminary certificate and the building permit on lots 5 and 6, that the limits of the wellhead protection area Zone 2 on these 2 lots will be surveyed and demarcated with signage.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I just wanted to be very clear on that, because with this amendment, I wanted to go back to the document that that was in front of us, so be very clear to everyone what we had done. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions from the commission members? Seeing none. Any federal, state, or local officials in the audience wish to comment? Members of the public like to comment? At this time, I would ask for a motion to close the hearing in the record. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? So moved. With the approval of the representative from Mashpee, Mr. Vigilio, I will make the following motion, or would you like to make it, sir?
I would like you to make it, sir.
I move to approve the Cape Cod Cooperative Bank preliminary plan as a hardship exemption with conditions, and to approve the draft decision as amended. Need a second. Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved. Thank you. Thank you for your patience today. The next agenda item is a public hearing. There is no hearing notice. The Airport Way Nominee Trust ANR final hearing / draft decision continued from November 28th, 2011. And I would at this time ask the subcommittee to approve the December 5th, 2011 draft of set minutes. We have a motion and a second. Go ahead. All in favor? Okay, any opposed? So moved. Elizabeth Enos, please proceed.
Again, for the record, Elizabeth Enos, Regulatory Officer. I'll be presenting the draft decision for Airport Nominee Trust. I'll review with you the existing setting, the project description, procedural overview, standards of review and approval, subcommittee findings and conditions, and subcommittee recommendations. The project is located at 180 Airport Way in Hyannis. It is approximately 12.5 acres of land with approximately 50% presently developed. It is a significant natural resource area due to a wellhead protection area and mapped rare species habitat, and it's in the ground-mounted solar overlay district. The project consists of a large solar energy array with approximately 1.38 megawatt peak output. The total development area is 4.4 acres. It is a ground-mounted solar panels that will stand 7 feet above the ground, with each row of solar panels being approximately 12.5 feet wide and 380 feet in length. 20 rows of panels are proposed, located to the east of the existing building on site. Additional panels are proposed on the existing building, and the facility will be located at least 64 feet from the front property line and enclosed within a 6-foot-high chain-link fence. Applications were received by the Commission on October 3rd, 2011. The DRI was referred by the Town of Barnstable Building Commissioner through the Interim Town Manager on October 12th, 2011. It is a DRI pursuant to Section 3E(I) of the Commission's enabling regulations as new construction or development that has a total project area greater than 40,000 square feet. The applicant has applied for a project of community benefit hardship exemption and limited DRI review. Public hearings were held on the project on November 21st, 2011, November 28th. Subcommittee meetings were held on November 28th also, and December 5th, 2011. Pursuant to Section 5 of the Enabling Regulations, the subcommittee determined the scope of DRI review to include land use, hazardous materials, waste management, water resources, wildlife and plant habitat, open space, and economic development. Pursuant to Section 23 of the Cape Cod Commission Act and Section 9 of the DRI Enabling Regulations, the Commission shall consider whether literal enforcement of the provisions of the Act would involve substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, and whether desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent or purpose of the Act. Any relief granted shall relate directly to the nature of the identified hardship and shall be the minimum necessary to address it. The subcommittee is recommending approval of the hardship exemption. The Commission shall also determine whether the proposed project complies with the Enabling Regulations definition of a project of community benefit, which is a project determined by the Commission to confer upon or result in distinct benefits to the community and the citizens of Barnstable County, consistent with Sections 1A and 1C of the Act, and they should consider whether full compliance with the minimum performance standards would constitute a hardship by diminishing the community benefits to be conferred. The subcommittee is also recommending approval as a project of community benefit. Now I'll review some of the key findings and conditions of the draft decision, beginning with water resources. The subcommittee found that the project site is located in a wellhead protection area, marine water recharge area, and a potential public water supply area. A public drinking water supply well is located approximately 1,000 feet down gradient of the site, and a critical nitrogen load has been established by the Mass Estuaries Project for Lewis Bay. The subcommittee found that pre- and post-construction nitrogen loading concentrations are less than 1 part per million, and the project will result in a net reduction in nitrogen load to the watershed consistent with the applicable standards. As conditions of approval under water resources, prior to issuance of a final certificate of compliance, the applicant shall submit for Commission staff review and approval a turf and landscape management plan pursuant to MPS WR 1.5, which requires that the project adopt best management practices, including avoiding or minimizing the amount of pesticides and chemical fertilizers, or utilizing alternatives to synthetic chemical fertilizers and pesticides in favor of organic and biological methods. Prior to issuance of a final certificate of compliance, the applicant shall submit for Commission staff review and approval a professional engineer certified stormwater maintenance and operation plan in order to meet WR 7.10. Under hazardous materials and waste, the entire site is located in a wellhead protection area. Minimum performance standards WR 2.2 and WM 1.1 prohibit the use, treatment, generation, handling, storage, or disposal of hazardous materials or hazardous waste, with the exception of household quantities and wellhead protection areas, except as provided in WM 1.2 and WM 1.3. The proposed utility transformer will contain a non-toxic vegetable oil-based fluid as a coolant. The RPP defines hazardous material as any chemical or substance that, when released in the environment, will pose a significant contaminant threat to groundwater and drinking water supplies, including petroleum products, petroleum distillates, organic and inorganic solvents, oil-based paints, oil-based stains, insecticides, herbicides, rodenticides, and pesticides. The subcommittee found that 1.5% or 5.5 gallons of the vegetable oil-based fluid meets the RPP definition of a hazardous material, and as such it complies with the applicable standards. As conditions of approval, hazardous materials and/or waste on site at any time shall not exceed a household quantity. The applicant shall provide to Commission staff for review and approval a pollution prevention and emergency response plan prior to issuance of a preliminary certificate of compliance, and prior to issuance of a final certificate of compliance, the applicant shall provide to Commission staff for review and approval the requisite documentation in order to comply with mass hazardous waste regulations, as well as a plan that addresses the disposal of waste banned material in order to comply with the applicable standards. Under natural resources, the site is located in a significant natural resource area due to the presence of mapped rare species habitat for Barron's buck moth and wellhead protection area. The site is mapped as biomap core habitat by the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, and in a letter dated August 31st, 2011, Natural Heritage determined that the project will not result in a take of state-listed rare species. The applicant has provided an assessment of the natural resources on the site that meets the requirements of WPH 1.1. The project installation proposes clearing and grading of the entire site and stockpiling topsoil for later redistribution. The subcommittee found that clearing of vegetation and alteration of natural topography is minimized and the proposed project complies with MPS WPH 1.2, provided that revegetation efforts are subject to review and approval by Commission staff. The subcommittee found that fragmentation of wildlife and plant habitat is minimized and that the project complies with MPS WPH 1.3. Under open space, the area of new clearing on the site is 3.9 acres. Since the project is located in an SNRA, the open space requirement is 7.8 acres. The subcommittee recommends that compliance with the open space requirements would constitute a hardship by diminishing the community benefits to be conferred, and that relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good, without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent or purpose of the Act. Subcommittee also found that the relief granted relates directly to the nature of the identified hardship and is the minimum necessary to address it. In consideration of granting relief from the open space requirements, the subcommittee recommends as a condition of approval that 1 year after installation of the solar panels, the applicant shall provide to the Commission an evaluation of the revegetation prepared by a wildlife and plant biologist to determine the success of the revegetation efforts. If an inventory of existing vegetation indicates that the site has failed to revegetate with a reasonable mix of shrubs and grasses, the applicant shall submit a revegetation plan to Commission staff for review and approval, which shall be executed in order to ensure meaningful habitat is established at the site. In the last issue area of economic development, the subcommittee found that the project meets the green design, shared infrastructure, emerging industry clusters, and municipal endorsement waiver criteria under MPS ED 1.3. Subcommittee found that the project is consistent with the region's emerging industry clusters as a renewable and clean energy project, and that the project will be a renewable distributed energy generator. By creating clean renewable energy, the project meets the green design criteria, and the facility is located within the town of Barnstable's newly created ground-mounted solar overlay district, which was designed to promote the creation of projects of this type, and therefore the project is consistent with this criteria as well. ED 4.1 requires that development of infrastructure and/or capital facilities shall be in response to existing regional demand and shall improve the availability, reliability, quality, and cost of services. The subcommittee found that the electricity provided by the project is proposed to offset the owner's electricity demands of their various properties on site and in the area, and therefore is in response to existing demand. The subcommittee found that the project would improve the availability of renewable solar energy on Cape Cod by directly serving existing Cape Cod customers. The subcommittee found that the project will improve reliability because the plant's peak generation period will exactly coincide with peak demand in the summer months on Cape Cod, and the plant will be located proximate to a feeder substation supplying power to the Cape's commercial hub in Hyannis, thereby reducing the demand on the transmission system to pull power from more distant resources. The subcommittee found that the project improves the quality of services by avoiding the traditional generation of the 45 gigawatt hours that will be produced in the first 25 years, which will eliminate the requirement for 213 billion cubic feet of natural gas, 80 pounds of enriched uranium, 2,150 tons of coal, and 371,250 gallons of crude oil. And since ownership of the proposed net metering project is local, the subcommittee found that the renewable energy it produces will offset local electricity expenses, and the solar renewable energy certificates will also provide economic flow into the region, thereby improving the cost of services. Based on this analysis, the subcommittee recommends that the project meets MPS ED 4.1. The subcommittee found that the project meets 3 best development practices under economic development. First, the proposed project's management, engineering, financing, accounting, legal services, construction, and maintenance are all being executed by local companies, consistent with best development practice ED 3.1. As the project is entirely locally owned, it is consistent with ED 3.2, and as a local generator of electricity, this project meets ED 3.5 by reducing the need to purchase energy generated outside the region. The subcommittee recommends these best development practices as probable benefits of the proposed project. And as you've heard a couple times tonight, the subcommittee recommends that the project is a project of community benefit and that compliance with the open space requirements would constitute a hardship by just diminishing the community benefits to be conferred, and that relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent or purpose of the Act. The subcommittee found that the relief granted relates directly to the nature of the identified hardship and is the minimum necessary to address it. Under criteria for approval, the subcommittee adopted the testimony of Joanne Miller-Buntich, Director of Growth Management for the Town of Barnstable, and recommends that the proposed project is consistent with Barnstable's local development bylaws, districts of critical planning concern, and local comprehensive plan. The subcommittee found that the project is consistent with the regional policy plan with the relief granted and upon satisfaction of the recommended conditions. And the subcommittee recommends that the probable benefits of the proposed development are greater than the probable detriments, with probable benefits of the proposed project to include providing energy to local businesses, providing a local green energy resource, the lack of impervious surfaces and reduction in nitrogen load, and the enhancement to wildlife as a result of replacing any future development at the site. The subcommittee found that the project meets best development practices ED 3.1, 3.2, and 3.5, which the subcommittee recommends are also probable benefits of the proposed project. In conclusion, the subcommittee recommends approval of the proposed project as a project of community benefit, hardship exemption, and approval of the draft written decision.
Thank you, and I would invite the applicant to make a presentation.
Yes. Yep. Pardon the delay while we watch her manipulate the file. My name is Luke Hinkle. I represent My Generation Energy and also the project proponent Airport Way Nominee Trust. And I'll briefly touch on the highlights, not nearly the formal presentation that we just heard, but some of the reasons why we believe this is an important project for the region. And I would also like to take this moment to thank the staff and the subcommittee for their input We believe the project has improved greatly since our first proposal with their really thoughtful information and suggestions. We'll see. Next, please. Yeah. So just to run down the quick facts, it does create renewable energy. This is a net metering facility, which means that the credit that it produces shows up on the bills as a benefit to the local businesses in the area. This project is also sited so that the electricity is produced when and where it is needed. There are 5,808 photovoltaic panels proposed, and they are U.S.-made panels. It's important to realize this project is a local development. Both the design, the financing, the engineering, the installation, and the maintenance are being done by Cape Cod-based companies. And finally, this will be installed on the building at the site that has a south-facing roof, and to a large degree on the ground next to that building at the site. So just to give an overview, this is the area in general. The site is sort of a hatchet-shaped lot, and I'm showing the majority of it here outlined in white. It has a neighboring substation. Across the road is a communications tower and, of course, the airport runway, and a test pad for the engine testing for the airport. Zooming in on the project itself, this shows both the building, which is to the lower left on the screen. 96 panels will go on that roof. And then the area to the right is the majority of the panels. And each of those gray rectangles in that array will power essentially one home. That's 24 solar panels. Next. I think, as it was mentioned earlier, a big part of this project, in addition to the renewable energy, is to set a precedent for how these projects should be developed. Instead of clearing and then putting gravel down or some impervious surface that resists or restricts plant growth, we're actually encouraging revegetation. And we're going to create an environment, not like is there now, but maybe even better in some ways than what is there now. So what you see in this rendering is low-growth native plants, both harvested when we remove the topsoil, stored and then revegetated, and also with a conservation mix. We'll be maintaining about a 20-degree slope to the south of the vegetation. So by the road, the trees will remain. And as we get closer to the project, we'll be trimming the height to avoid shading in the wintertime. Next, please. This is a view from the road. And this shows, essentially from the road, you'll see the front of the solar panels through the shrubs and trees. Just to reemphasize, there are two major benefits in terms of the environmental aspects. And one is simply we won't be requiring as much fuel. And when we use fuel, it's not just the fuel itself, it's that we have to mine or drill for it. It's that we have to process it, transport it, store it, and then finally consume it. All of that's avoided. And because not many people know what 213 billion cubic feet of natural gas looks like, imagine 1,000 Goodyear blimps full of natural gas. That's what's avoided by the project. And 80 pounds of enriched nuclear fuel. 40,000 cubic yards of radioactive tailings are created when that fuel is mined. The coal and petroleum are more obvious. And these are all ands. This is the mix of our current electricity production in the New England region and Cape Cod in particular. Next, please. The second aspect is the byproducts from those fuels and how we can avoid those. And here we're avoiding nitric oxide, nitrous oxide, related NO, SO2, acid rain-forming chemicals and smog chemicals, and then, of course, CO2, greenhouse gas chemicals. And again, to emphasize there are 80 pounds of nuclear waste that will not have to be stored for 100,000 years because of this project, just in its first 25 years. Next, please. Community benefits, and making a quick rundown because I know they've been covered, but to emphasize, there are both immediate and long-range benefits. And local businesses will benefit from this. Local businesses own and use the electricity from this project. This helps to stabilize the cost of electricity to those businesses. Next, please. So I want to emphasize this is not a power plant acting alone, selling power to the grid. Next, please. So when considering the financial influx of economic value, this project will bring $1.8 million of federal funds into the region. This is in the form of a federal grant. These projects are expensive. The federal government understands that and wants to invest in this as a future for our country. It's infrastructure avoidance, it's imported fuel avoidance, and in general, just to support clean, renewable energy in the country. So we're taking advantage of that, and we're bringing that value into the region. We're going to create an estimated 8 full-time green-collar positions during the construction phase of the project. In addition, there are many other collars around here that will get a little greener. Think about accountants, attorneys, supporting industries. Next, please. The long-term benefits, a little less obvious in some ways, but the electricity cost avoidance and increases in electricity cost are avoided by the system. And the solar renewable energy certificates, again, a program that incentivizes people to build systems, in effect makes the electricity of these systems' power more valuable. That brings dollars from largely out of state, somewhat in state but off Cape, to the Cape. And I just want to emphasize, utility bills and electricity bills in general are a net export from Cape Cod. When we generate electricity on the Cape, now it becomes an avoided import. So keeping our dollars close in the community instead of sending them across the same wires that bring the electricity across the bridge. Next, please. So just a very quick visual on what we mean by when and where it's needed. Solar works on the sunny summer days, which are also the peak times for electric use in the area. This project, and if you can click the next, is sited in a place where ordinarily this is the electric distribution to the area. Down the main feeder, goes to the substation, next to where our project will be located, and then is distributed throughout the industrial park area and Independence Drive. Now with the project, its electricity will go to that same substation and get distributed throughout that area. So it's serving a need when it's required, primarily on the summer days, and in a location where there is plenty of on-site and nearby use. Next, please. So I'll run down the benefits very quickly. This also creates a workforce on the Cape. That is a workforce that we are planning to export to other areas in southeastern Massachusetts. The capability to design, construct, and maintain these systems. Compared with other projects which may be going on, because this is designed, built, and maintained with Cape-based labor, this, as opposed to many other projects, is a local benefit. Next, please. I'm certainly not going to read this, but I did want to quote from the regional policy plan, and almost every aspect of this project fits into the letter of the rule here. Next, please. Looking closely just for a moment at the stormwater management. There's an existing stormwater management issue at the site. This project, if it goes forward, will fix that problem. This project's stormwater management largely handles the previously developed portion of the site's stormwater. And we're going to great expense to do this the right way and to actually reduce the nitrogen loading in that wellhead protection area. Next, please. I won't bore you with the engineering details, but just some figures to emphasize the degree to which the stormwater management is being implemented. Next. We can skip to the next one. I think Elizabeth covered this well. To give some indication of what other sites have done, this is a revegetated solar project, and we're expecting a similar sort of look to our revegetation of the array. Next, please. There's precedent for this on the Cape. This is at Mass Military Reservation. About 2.5 years ago, a road had to be cleared through the forest. Next, please. They stockpiled and then spread the topsoil back over the project area. Next. And in about a year, the regrowth of the rootstock was occurring. And next, a couple years later, it's getting back to where you could almost not tell where that temporary road had been developed. So we're hoping to produce a similar kind of scenario here. Again, this will be a relatively shaded area because of the panels themselves. So the understory should recover and be a simulation of what it was when the trees were in the same area. Next, please. So a very quick rundown of the open space. As it presently exists, it's not a high-quality open space area. It's not suitable for passive recreation, and it's fairly segmented with the other development to the east, to the west, and the road to the south, with a barbed wire fence at that road on the other side. Next, please. So with the meaningful restoration of the habitat, and next, and avoiding all of the common problems with traditional development. Next, please. We think that reducing the project size to meet the open space requirement simply as a square foot reduction would reduce the benefit of the renewable energy. For solar, the more square feet you have, the more energy you produce. And finally, imposing a mitigation renders the project economically unviable. And at the risk of showing a spreadsheet at a presentation, the next slide is, you can look at it in your booklet, but I'll just highlight that the project's income, the total revenue, is about $600,000 a year. Its expenses are in the neighborhood of about $200,000 a year. So it has an operating income of about $400,000 a year. Next slide, please. To finance it, the financing charge is about $500,000 a year. So it'll run a net deficit, and the chart helps, you don't have to read the numbers, for the first 7 years during the financing period. And the project basically goes in the hole $1 million over that 7 years. And then it takes another 2.5, 3 years to climb out of the hole. And at that point, the SREC program, the Renewable Energy Certificate program that funds the project in a sense, runs out. So it is marginally viable. The owners are doing it because it's the right thing to do. And we really can't afford to take the risk of mitigating the open space requirement. Next, please. You can click through these quickly. So to summarize, this does create renewable energy. Further, it net meters that renewable energy to the businesses in the area. 5,808 solar panels, and these are U.S.-made product. They get shipped straight from Tennessee. The truck loads them up at the factory and delivers them to the site. The local aspect of this is powerful. We are using local resources. We are developing local talent. Next, please. So we request the relief from the open space requirement. And next, we believe this is a project of community benefit. We would appreciate your positive vote in this matter.
Thank you. Questions from the members of the commission? Roger.
You say you're going to put this into the substation. Excuse me. You're going to feed the substation directly?
Most of the power will end up going through the substation, yes.
Well, then doesn't it enter the grid and you lose control over it? I mean, the fact that once it gets to the substation, you have no control over where it's distributed, do you?
The actual electricity itself goes wherever it wants, like water flowing through pipes, absolutely.
Okay.
But it does leave the property, in that case, going through a meter. That meter records the exit, and then that credit can be applied to the businesses in the area.
The credit is applied to the businesses in the area, so that the difference between the wholesale rate of power and the rate that you're supplying is going to be what, around 10 cents a kilowatt?
With the existing net metering regulations, the credit is essentially retail, not wholesale.
Well, that's what
So,
I'm saying.
so
Yeah.
the owners of the project will benefit their businesses at retail rate, not wholesale rate.
Not wholesale rate.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The only other thing is, how many power plants will be shut down? How many coal plants, et cetera, will be shut down because of this?
It's a good question. Of course, even though this is a large solar project, it does not compare to a single coal-fired plant
Thank
like
you.
Brayton Point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions from the commission? Yes, Elizabeth.
It's nice to see these sprouting up all over the Cape. We have 3 going up in Brewster. And at some point, do you expect that the setup cost will level off so they aren't essentially losing propositions for the first 7 years? And I don't know how much longer we'll see federal funding on this. Do you expect that that will change in the future? Will the costs come down for production?
We certainly hope and expect that the cost of the materials, as it has been, will continue to reduce. And there is a transition away from the subsidies. However, I need to point out that traditional energy is also subsidized. So a level playing field means some subsidies.
Yeah.
Not to the current level, but I think we will get there in the next 5 to 6 years, most projections predict.
Thank you.
Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of my concerns was the open space and the mitigation of open space, and the reason why the committee went forward to support that. And I'm going to ask Paul if he could just briefly explain some of the things that he told us at committee about that and the advantages of why we did this, why we're doing this.
I would be happy to. It would be easier to do with a map, but perhaps we all know the area well enough that we can sort of visualize what's happening out there. And you've got the airport, which has been, we've discussed at great length today. And then basically you've got a triangle that goes up to exit 6 on the Mid-Cape and exit 7. And decades ago, the town of Barnstable really took that property, I think through the Barnstable Housing Association by eminent domain, for the purpose of establishing an industrial area. And there happened to be a lot of wells up there, so it's probably wasn't the best thing to do at the time. But subsequent to that, they worked with the state, and Fish and Wildlife took half of that property back from exit 7 in Yarmouth, really to the Mary Dunn Road area. Since that time, you have Enterprise Road that sort of cuts through the middle of the industrial park, and there have been a lot of efforts on the town of Barnstable at providing open space to that southern part that backs up to the airport. For a number of reasons. The area, this Cape and Island Steel property here is it's adjacent to the airport, but it's on this road, the lower part of Mary Dunn Road, that you would never want to drive any vehicle you cared about on. And so to have more development down there was always something that the town really didn't see. It was just too much infrastructure associated with that. So there have been many attempts, and many of them supported by businessmen in the industrial area, like Mr. Shepley and the LaRusso Land Trust, to acquire property down there. It's also, every town has to have an adult entertainment zone. Well, you're sort of looking at it to the north of this property right here. And a lot of those property owners down there were very successful several years back in keeping out potential development in that area. And so it's been an area where the town has supported a strategic approach at providing open space and narrowing that industrial focus. And the town supports the property, and the town has zoned it for ground-mounted solar. So it's really been a partnership between the town and the businesses in the industrial service and trade area. And for that reason, and a lot of other reasons, one of the reasons that I'm most excited about the project is we're seeing these all over the place. And a lot of the towns are doing solar projects on their landfills. And we need to find out what kind of habitat will grow up on the other side of these things. And so the project applicant here has been kind enough to allow us to go back in after a year and sort of study what kind of things are going to happen and be possible on the other side of this. We're going to continue to see more of these projects. So for all of those reasons, I certainly agree to the subcommittee when they recommended the waiver of the open space.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Mr.
may.
Richardson. Yeah, hold on. I'll get
Yeah,
back.
just a comment. I just wanted to emphasize the fact that of the approximately new development on 4 acres, with revegetation, this is 4 acres that will probably have close to 0 impervious cover. I think that's very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Richardson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move to approve the Airport Way Nominee Trust Project of Community Benefit DRI Hardship Exemption with conditions, and to approve the draft written decision as amended.
Before you take any action on that, could you close your hearing in your record? And did you take public testimony?
Right.
Yes, thank you very much.
To go before.
We were
what I
backing
just
up while you were standing
said, I
up.
move
So.
that we close.
Yes, federal, state, or local officials like to speak. I'm getting there. A lot of backseat drivers today, let me tell you. Like I said, federal, state, or local officials in the audience like to comment. Seeing none, anybody from the public like to comment? Seeing none, now I would ask for a motion to close the hearing in the record.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Yes, and now I would ask Mr. Richardson for the motion.
I'm sorry. I like to jump the gun, that's all. Okay, I move to approve the Airport Way Nominee Trust Project of Community Benefit DRI Hardship Exemption with conditions, and to approve the draft written decision as amended.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yes, opposed.
One opposed. Any abstentions? So moved. Now, any other business before the commission? Yes.
Mr. Chair, I just want to thank the commission members for your patience here with our last meeting of the year, which was a rather long one, but an important one. And just to let you know that we will be having sort of an end-of-year gathering at the Dolphin later, if any of you want to stop by and participate. So thank you for your patience. It's been an aggressive agenda this year, and it's only going to get worse next year. So thanks.
Thank you. I do have a CCC member comment. Joy poked Paul and I about executive committee meetings as well as past projects. And I went out to the Dale Avenue property to see how that house came. It was a DRI that was done. And I asked Sarah Korjeff to do a PowerPoint presentation with a few photographs so we might see what it is that we accomplished and have built. So I'm hoping that that's in process and hope that that will address Joy's concern. You're welcome. Any other member comments? Seeing none, move to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.